So much has changed throughout our time living with him. Our lives, in a way, were a little better. We didn't go to school like ordinary children. Instead, we were taught by our new father. Anything he knew, we knew. He'd teach us only the most imperative of things, such as reading, writing, math, a little science, even some manners that he'd say would be disrespectful in some situations. I soon got on with his lessons, as Edmund wasn't exactly focused. He'd do this every day during the week, sitting us down at the small brown oak table, getting ready to teach us, and also letting some sunshine in through the kitchen windows, letting us eat and learn, helping us, even having school-like gear on him. He even tried to make it a little fun where we'd all laugh and enjoy our time. Though Edmund, he'd still find most of it more so boring. But we both knew he was trying. Even letting us have a type of recess, and letting us do whatever we desired for an hour. Then, right back to learning. Can this be over yet? Even for a 5-year-old boy, I am known as the genius in the family. I love to think of new inventions, creations, mechanical mechanisms that would change the lives of others or even benefit from. Though admitting some of my inventions would sometimes crash and blow. It was still a learning process after all. Yeah! I would beg my father to let me learn more, preferably at the library, to learn more new information and data that could help me in my studies. He would look down at me. He seemed happy to know that I had an admiration to studying and learning on a higher educational level. Please, Dad, can I please go to the library today? Over time, I'd become a better creator, even with bookshelves filled with books and even with boxes filled with pieces of components and fun modeling kits to learn more from. Even high educational books that I'd read over and over again, trying to absorb the information that I could at the time. I'd even stay up late at night with a flashlight in my bed, reading and absorbing new kinds of fascinating topics and facts. However, for my brother, he could care less of what I studied. What really piqued his interest were video games, comic books, and some types of shows that play on certain times of the day, so he would stop what he would do originally and sit in front of the TV. Sometimes too closely to where Dad would have to shovel him a little further away, always having to remind him that if he kept it up, he'd have to wear glasses one day. But Edmund was too preoccupied in the show to even hear our dad lecture him. Though it didn't seem to bother him too much, he would just chuckle or shake his head a little and continue doing what he desired to. Though, out of everything, video games were his top interest. He'd play and click on those buttons on the controller until he beat the game or until he got hungry. I really haven't seen him so enthused before. He'd just play constantly, every day, sometimes all day if he could. I'm not sure if this was due to his own therapeutic way of forgetting our parents' death or not, but ever since our new dad found us, Edmund hasn't mentioned anything nor even gave the hint that he was grieving over them. Perhaps these games eased his hurt heart from all that we've been through. I didn't belittle or judge him for it. As long as I saw him happy, that's all I cared about. Though there was one catch to being with him. He made us join the agency he was in, saying that we'd have a great role to play. However, being in the agency now, we had to do training, rigid training that we'd be doing for the rest of our lives. That this was the point into our existence now. At the time, we didn't know what to make of it. Should we be excellent? He would tell us that we'd be playing a big role, but what role? He never said anything about it yet, only to say that we'd be helping and doing things for the greater good. We'd protect the acquitted and stop the malicious, but we needed to get in training while we were juvenile, so when it was time, we'd be more ready. Do you understand what he's kind of saying? No. Edmund and I could only stand there muddled out of our minds about what he was trying to tell us. In simpler terms, he said we'd almost be like cops, but in bigger agency and corporation, that we would prevent calamities like what we've been through. Once we heard that, we were a little jovial to know that we could defend people, that one day we could stop any bad man or woman from trying to injure families. Once we nodded at each other and put away our fate within the agency, that's when our lives really took a turn that would soon become a typical everyday life situation. That it would become part of us and alter our lives forever. That would no longer be these ordinary boys doing what little boys do, but part of something superior and grander beyond our little ingenuities, and adventures that would soon befall us in the future. We just didn't know it yet, too young to comprehend and too oblivious to care. We would one day grasp fully of what it means to be a real spy, fluctuating not just us, but the world around us and our perspective of life itself. This is gonna be so cool. Yeah, I'm gonna be like a superhero. We would start our day generally, like how we used to if we had to go to school, but we would have to train instead. The only alteration was school would start around 8 in the morning, meaning we'd have to wake up around 7. However, our training commenced at 5, but it wasn't just days that we'd have to wake up at this hour, but weekends too. Our dad, who we call our master now as well, would endlessly tell us we had an imminent duty that must be taken earnestly, as if we were adults, that our training was valuable and imperative to the point that it would require all our time and strength, that it would one day save our lives from opposing dangers ahead of and near our future, that we would be the fate of our own destiny, and before if anything were to happen to us, that the people would rely on us to be there. Honestly, we had no gist of what he was talking about. We were so still new to this, and I think some days he forgets we were only 5. It was only 2 years ago or so when we learned our ABCs. Never mind what he was lecturing about. But we would nod as if we understood, though, however, when his back was turned, we'd look at each other like we heard something from another language, though we shrugged it off anyway. You get it? Not really, but alright. Regardless of whether we liked or hated the idea of waking so early, we'd obey and wake up at that hour. We would then wear our distinct outfits that our master had made for us, almost as if they were uniforms. We wore a plain red t-shirt, navy blue overcoats that would stretch down to the bottom of our pants, gold necklaces that had this huge letter E hanging on it that indicated the first letter of our names. Do not ask why he gave us these, perhaps just for decoration. They didn't seem to serve any other purpose, that's for sure. Long blue jeans and black and blue shoes with blue laces. Our master seemed to have this thing for dark colors, but nonetheless, we both liked them, thinking it was very extraordinary. So we agreed to wear them. Almost done? Yeah, in a moment. Just putting on these pants. After we were done dressing, which would honestly take a good amount of time, we'd sometimes eat breakfast if our master would agree to it. He was a very strict master to have, and to think teachers could be rough. He was beyond what we had presumed, though we owed him. We were in his debt for saving our lives, or we wouldn't be here today. So anything he did or said, we would mostly obey it, as if we were trying to say thank you. However, I didn't think he considered it that way. But those actions were between Edmund and I only. We knew if we were to actually tell him that he'd say there would be no need. But there was a valid reason for this, the cold air outside, and just seeing the wind blow as autumn leaves would fly by, and the frost appear on the windows from the changing of the seasons. Almost winter to where the dew point in the atmosphere would freeze any object outside, leaving its freezing stick that would pinch the skin. Leaving its freezing stick that would pinch the skin on contact. I knew we'd freeze to death. Edmund knew it too. We both did. We deemed the same when it came to that notion. Just looking at the wind blow, thinking back to when we were on the streets, made me have a cold feeling up my back. We were both obligated for what he's done. We could have died. He could have killed us for whatever sadistic reason. He could have kidnapped us and did God knows what. But he stood up and took the responsibility as a father figure and took care of us, slowly and starting calling us his sons, as if we were truly his. He didn't always say it, no. I think he was too new to the idea. But I didn't think anyone in the city would do this for us. That it was all just a hopeful vision, almost like a fantasy, that someone would come along and take us without sending us away. So, what more could we do but smile, obey, silently through our own whispering saying thank you to him, even if he could not hear us. Thanks for everything. Now, as for our diets, I eat healthier than Edmund. I wouldn't say I was fully, but for the most part I was a vegetarian. I'd only eat meat on rare occasions. I wanted to stay fit and strong as our training were seemingly getting firmer as we progressed. I figured I'd need all the energy I'd need to withstand our master's teachings. However, for Edmund, as you could probably estimate, he's a full-on meat eater. The word veggie is torture to him. He won't go near a single veggie without gagging or pushing it away from his plate in disgust. Yeah. Gross. Even our master couldn't get him to eat it. However, we both hoped over the years he'll have a little bit of a different taste than he does now. I'm gonna be sick. Until then, he wouldn't even open his mouth and face the other way while pouting. I giggled slightly to myself. Did think he was my identical twin, but the only thing we had in common was our hairstyles. Well, slightly. Our black bangs would be in different spots from one another, but one could never really truly tell. We'd have the same blue eyes and our smile would seem the same. Not only that, but our voices were almost similar, just in different pitches at times. Too bad we just didn't think on the same level, though I guess I have one thing to be elated about. I was the smart one. After our meal, if allowed or granted to, we train, and boy did we train a lot. Novice materials, of course, but still a lot of strain for a young boy's growing body. We'd do sit-ups, pull-ups, jumping jacks, run 2 laps or so around the training room, which was on the bottom floor, almost like a basement, so it was pretty vast. Though, believe it or not, we'd even lift some weights. Nothing too extreme because our master knew not to pressure us too gravely. He didn't want to put any tension on us, or he'd know we'd be too injured, and that was the last thing he wanted. So after that, we'd do some stretches, climbing ropes, until we lost our grip and had to do it all over again until we reached the top, which was about the same height you'd find at a school's gym. You okay, Edmund? Yeah, fine. Peachy. However, that's all we seemed to practice for now. He claimed that we were far too young to learn anything more until he knew himself that we were ready for more experienced material. We didn't have a problem with that. Phew. In the end, we were exhausted, heavily breathing and wanted to take a nap. Sometimes we even did. We would cuddle on the couch together as night would descend, and having the windows open, letting the cool air in, as we'd snuggle in the blanket and get comfortable. The TV would be off, and most of the lights, and before we drifted off, I could swear I heard a slight chuckle from our master. But other times, even if weary, we'd do our own things. Edmund would sit down in front of the TV and play his video games once more. He would try his hardest to gain a level, and the only time he seemed focused was when he was really getting into the gameplay. While I, on the other hand, had my own space for inventing. It was a decent desk in our room that I worked on. And because I wasn't a big inventor yet, there would only be tiny pieces of scrap metal around, along with little tools I used. However, one thing that was always a bit complicated that I had to pull off. Most of the time, I'd have to make the programming data straightforward for Edmund to understand so he wouldn't abolish my machine by accident. It's not always easy taking a somewhat complex machinery, taking its hardware and databases, programming it ever so precisely, even to the point where he'd understand. However, I don't expect him to. That's just the way he was, and I think that's the way he's going to stay. I just wanted to make machines that would make him and I's lives more fluently, and making duties around the house such as chores go by faster. Don't tell me he doesn't understand yet. Come on, Edmund, it's not that hard to understand. I made it easy just for you. Yeah, but what's it for again? So I would just sit there, making schematics in the dimness of the room. The only light was my lamp on the Auburn desk. Crinkled up papers were always by the trash bin on the right side of the desk. Over and over again I would toss what I alleged wasn't good enough. No, that's not good. Sometimes even frustrated to where I just sat there until I would fall asleep and our dad would come in and put me to bed. I would feel as he would pull the cotton covers over me as I would lay my head on the soft pillow. Even kissing my forehead, a tender kiss of a parent I haven't felt in so long, it really made me contented, like if I was really home again. Though, even when adjusting to new life that we were thankfully given, as life has given us a second chance, the past still haunted us. Well, in our new room, we were in our bunk beds instead of separate beds. Our room was quite small, as if it was only suited for one person, so we had to make the best of it. I had the top bunk since Edmund was slightly nervous sleeping up there, so I said I'd take it. He didn't protest. While sleeping for the night, Edmund's fear of the dark still lurked, now more than ever after what happened. His eyes would gleam as he would glare out the window. The reflection of the window replayed as if it was a crystal ball of what happened that night. It spooked him slightly. The wind was just as it was that night, gently blowing, making the curtains sway, as the full moon, that full moon that was there that day, it witnessed what had happened. Anxiety rose slightly, though he knew he couldn't bother me. He didn't want to be up there. His distress of what had happened, he seemed to question himself over and over of, what if it were to happen again without warning? He would start to quiver and he would breathe heavily. He couldn't stop imagining, contemplating, cogitating. What if next time they come here, the same bad men that took our parents away would once again find where we live and take away our new dad? The dad we'd grown to now care so much for. He almost began to cry with his own dread surrounding him like a dark void. He couldn't stand it anymore. He wanted to be with someone, anyone at this point. So he grabbed his favorite pillow off of his bed. He would delicately get up, trying to avoid making the bed creak from his movements, as he would sway his legs over the edge. He came down with a tiny thud, and he would instantly look up at me, just staring as if he woke me up. But he didn't. He took a tiny sigh and clung to his pillow, snuggling it as if it was a hug. He ambled towards the door and pushed it open since it wasn't closed all the way. Just a crack opened. He looked down the hallway. All was still, all was quiet. The chirping, the mocking of the chirping that he heard that night petrified him even more. He would duck his head as he would slowly go into the living room, looking around, seeing shadows upon the wall. He would look and they would swerve as his imagination would play a wicked game, making them seem like they were creatures of the night, waiting for its helpless prey to come closer to it, so it could grab it and kill it. The complete silence besides some wind was reckoning. He would slowly move away from both the living room and the kitchen. He still wasn't used to being around here at night. No such thing as monsters. No such thing are monsters. You can do this. Look away. Look away. He would shiver and hide his face in his pillow, trying to say there weren't monsters. They were just shadows. Shadows that were just pranking him into tears. There's no such thing. No such thing. They're shadows. They're shadows. Once he made it to our master's bedroom. Normally, we weren't allowed to go in there. That he remembered our master saying that this was the one place in the house that we weren't allowed to go into. That was forbidden. But what choice did Edmund have? He would have a sleepless night if he went back to the room. He stopped suddenly, just looking at our master's door, and gulped. Yeah. He was still disturbed by his reminiscence, his nightmares of which gave him enough courage to open the door and see our master fast asleep, slightly snoring. Edmund felt a bit intimidated. He didn't know what he would say, whether to head back to his room scared or allow him to sleep next to him just for one night. He just stood there, holding his pillow, looking at our master. Until his ingenuity played another sick game. It was dark in the room. He would look upon the walls and would imagine the dagger of what killed our parents, and only to hear it in his head of what it would be like to hear our master scream. He bent over a bit and tried to shake that thought away, to make his mind stop playing the game with him. That it wasn't funny nor a joke. At this point, he just wanted the okay, the reassurance of everything. Stop. He stood slightly straight and took a breath in and out and started ambling over slowly. He tried not to make too much of a sound, so he would lift his leg only so lightly that it would rub against the carpet floor. He would make a soft sweep every time, and even him clenching his pillow, you can hear the fabric being pulled on as a little breath could be heard, a breath of a child who was terrified. As he approached closer, he was completely startled to make him jump and have an inner twitch and tingling feeling when he heard our master say. Our master rubbed his eyes and stretched slightly.
It's late. You should be in bed by now. Sleeping like your brother.
He turned to look at Edmund, who was lost for words. He didn't think he had such an acute sense of hearing that he'd hear him walk in like that. The two just gazed at each other. Our master was tired and exhausted from yesterday, and Edmund still quivering in his own contemplations. He would have said something, but instead just stared. He was too choked up to say anything, too afraid to open his mouth to speak. He thought of what he wanted to say, but it wasn't coming out like he expected. This only made the situation more discomforting and uneasy for him. He kept his pillow close. He couldn't take it upon himself to say anything, just hoping that our master would understand nonetheless through his eyes that would tell of his qualms, his notions, his anxieties. But our master was too tired to recognize this. Our master soon asked,
What's with the silent treatment? Speak your mind to me. What's wrong?
Edmund said tensely, as if they met for the first time. I'm just scared. Edmund looked downward as if he was about to get scolded for his own notions, or just being in his room. Our master crossed his arms, asking,
Scared? Scared of what? You are safe here, you know that.
Our master was never the one to be precisely sympathetic when it came to some situations, but at this point, it almost seemed like he was, that he saw it in Edmund's eyes now. He looked like he was about to cry at any moment. That night. What if it happens again? What if they come back? What if they find me and my brother again? Our master nodded, knowing he wasn't truly over the affliction that he had dealt with. Not that he was totally surprised. He knew he went through what no child should have. Actually, more so surprised I didn't join Edmund in being frightened like he was. He went through a child trauma, and he knew it wouldn't totally pass anytime soon. He knew he couldn't say it wouldn't happen again, because he knew anything was possible. Especially being part of an agency made things like this even more so of a possibility, that it could easily happen here, and was well aware of that kind of situation.
Even if it happens again, if anything, I'd be more than prepared for it.
But what if they come for... He was panting at this point, scared out of his mind. He may be able to dodge it or stop it, but what if we couldn't? That's what scared him the most. We got away unharmed, and if we were to have stayed just a little longer, they could have gotten us too. At this point, his voice was cracking due to his overproductive saliva glands, and his throat would hurt from the sinking feeling he had within him.
I understand that you are worried and concerned, and that night has truly tormented you. But I can assure you, whatever does happen, God forbid, they would want me, not you. And I'd be damned if I let them even go near you. My senses are still on alert. They have to be. So even if they thought twice of taking you two, they'd have to fight me first. I wouldn't let anything happen to you two. You poor boys have been through enough already. So I'll make sure you're safe and secure, and that's my promise to you.
Edmund looked down as he remembered me saying everything would be okay, and I promised him that. It was almost hard for him to believe, considering everything sure was alright for the most part, but at the same time wasn't. Well, for him. Eddie? Our master just looked at him, wondering what he was getting at. Edmund continued. Eddie promised everything was going to be alright, too, but it's not.
You have what you should have. A roof over your head, clean clothes, a nice meal as I promised. How are these things not all right? What do you mean, child?
Because my parents are dead. Nothing can bring them back. I won't see them again. And all because of that night. And that promise wasn't a true promise. He told me I'd wake up, that Mommy and Daddy would still be there. Now. He looked downward while crying, holding his pillow that was slightly getting wet due to his tears. It was apparent how tormented and as fragile his mind was right now, that he wouldn't go back to sleep so easily after this, and perhaps for a while he'd be like this, until he would overcome his fears. He'd be like this, quivering and shaking. This time, our master did show his sympathy and pity for him. However, our master just sighed. He knew it was going to take some time for him to fully be cured of his affliction and grief. In his mind, he didn't know exactly what to do. He hasn't worked with children before, so this was new to him. He was almost baffled on what to do. This is nothing of what he was used to, nor had a full understanding of how to handle it completely. He even tried to think back to his childhood. But even he wasn't like this at his age. But then again, at the age of 5, he wasn't like this either. Nothing had happened to him at the age of 5 to cause this emotion. He could only watch Edmund cry and sniffling quietly to himself. He wanted it to stop. For the first time, our master's heart sank for Edmund's sake. He couldn't explain it, but he hated to see him cry. He knew he had to do something to ease him, though a split second of his mind was, why? Why now? He didn't find it unbearable when he found us on the street for the first time, and he remembered Edmund crying then, and didn't feel the way he did now, almost feeling guilty that he didn't know Edmund is traumatized, and all he did was chuckle back then, and try to lead us back to his home, trying to be a saint of a man. He didn't show emotion to a crying boy until now, and the more he cried, the more it got to him, making him grit his teeth, wanting the crying to stop as it shivered down his spine. Something about a crying child who's hurt and tormented ate him up, like if he knew the feeling himself. Even yelling out, surprising Edmund a bit.
Please, stop! do you wish of me? What can I do to make you calm again?
If it's alright, can I sleep with you? Just for tonight. He wiped his own tears away with his plain dark green pajamas. Our master nodded, thinking if that was the only thing that would appease him. Not only that, it was 2 a.m. and they both needed sleep. So what else could he do? He was never a father himself, even wondering if other fathers would allow this. And if they do, he would be up for it as well. That he would try his best to be a good father to both of us. And anything to stop Edmund's tears. He nodded, saying,
If it will make you feel more at ease and make the tears stop, then I'll allow it.
Edmund smiled ever so slightly and ambled over to him. Our master made room for him and batted to where he wanted him to go. Edmund nodded and got into bed with him. Once settled, our master pulled his blankets over him, trying to make him feel safe and secure. Soon enough, out of his surprise, Edmund cuddled up next to him. He never had a child cuddle him before. It was all so new to him. He seemed to even like the embrace. He knew now that he was truly a father, that we weren't just boys off the street anymore, that we were truly his sons. He wanted it to stay that way. He never felt the need to protect so heavily before, and not just the innocence of people. He wondered if this was really how it was to feel like a father, so protective and so displeased when a child cries. And it must be, because that's how he was feeling right now. Soon enough, he would wrap his arms around Edmund like a shield. The two cuddled up as our master started to stroke his little head, hoping to calm him. This was truly a new experience for our master. However, even after all that, he smiled slightly as the two drifted to sleep.